I need your help to stop it. Anne pressed a hand to her breast to still her pounding heart. No, no, no. She wasn't the kind of person who could easily lie or pretend. Anne had always been an open book. Anyone could read any emotion on her face. She'd argued this with Halverson, but he'd insisted she could help him. She was in a strategic position, one that touched on a number of key players in politics. If Trinity had sleeper cells in those positions, she could spot them before anyone else. Theoretically. Anne hated that Halverson had paid the ultimate price. At the same time, she no longer had to report things she saw or heard, which meant she didn't have to worry that she was being watched or targeted. Until now. Until the text warning her about Trinity. Shooting a glance around the office and the four corners of the room, she wondered if anyone had a webcam recording her every move. She'd gotten good at discovering small audio and video recording devices stashed in telephone receiver units, lights, ceiling tiles, potted plants, and office furniture. She'd made a habit of scouring the room at least once a day. She'd found a small audio device once early on, when Halverson had still been alive. They'd met at a bookstore in Arlington, where Halverson had identified the device and told her about others she should be on the lookout for. Since Halverson's death, she'd continued looking over her shoulder. As time passed, she'd become lax. No one appeared to be following her or watching her. How wrong had she been? And why had this person come to her now? Instead of answering the previous text, she shoved her phone into her purse and left her office. Her heart hammered against her ribs and her breathing came in shallow pants. She was overreacting. That was all there was to it. But who had given out her phone number? And how did they know she'd once been involved with Halverson? She'd kept that part of her life as clandestine as possible, trying to ensure her trysts with Halverson were in as out-of-the-way a venue as she could. She'd usually met him in a public library, where running into people she worked with was highly unlikely. It wasn't a bar, and it wasn't a coffee shop. She thought it was the best cover of all. How many terrorists did she know who made good use of a public library? She'd never been to Halverson's mansion, and she'd always worn a disguise when she'd met with him at the library, never driving her own car, but taking public transportation. Once out in the open, she inhaled fresh night air. Anne had been so busy working she hadn't realized it had rained earlier. The ground was still wet, and light reflected off the standing puddles. Her phone vibrated inside her purse, causing her heart to skip a beat. She ignored it and strode toward the metro station, wishing she'd left while there was still some daylight chasing away the shadows. Though night had settled in, people still moved around the city. Men and women dressed in business suits, dress shoes, and trench coats hurried home from office buildings after a long day at work. Still, the number of people headed toward the train station was significantly less than during the regular rush hours. Anne wished she'd worn her tennis shoes to work rather than the tight, medium-heeled pumps that had been pinching her feet since 5 o'clock that morning. Again, the phone vibrated in her purse. She could feel the movement where her purse rested against her side. Ignoring the insistent pulsation, she moved quickly, determined to make the next metro train headed toward Arlington, where she lived in a modest apartment. Footsteps sounded behind her. Anne shot a glance over her shoulder. A man wearing a black jacket and jeans strode behind her, less than half a block away. He also wore a dark baseball cap, shading his face and eyes from the street lights he passed beneath. Alarm bells rang in Anne's head. She increased her pace. The man behind her sped up as well. Still a couple of blocks away from the train station, Anne realized the streets had become deserted. The people she'd passed earlier must have hopped into taxis or found their cars in the paid parking lots. Alone and on the street with a man following too closely behind her, Anne couldn't move fast enough. Then she remembered there was a restaurant at the corner of the next street, which now became her new short-range goal. Clutching her purse to her side, she sprinted for the door, her feet moving as fast as they could in heels. She didn't slow to see if the man following her was running too. She only knew she had to get to that restaurant. When she reached the restaurant door, she almost sobbed. It was closed, the lights were turned out, and no one moved inside.